There was a season in my life where I was convinced, genuinely convinced, that I had missed it. Not missed an opportunity. Missed it. The whole thing. My purpose. My calling. I grew up in church. I knew the stories. Moses, David, Paul. Men who were clearly chosen, clearly used by God. And I kept looking at my own life thinking, that's not me. That was never going to be me. Maybe you know that feeling. Maybe you're in it right now. What I didn't know is that there's a pattern. A very specific, very consistent pattern that shows up every single time God chooses someone in the Bible. 5 things he does. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Not in scripture, and not in my own life. That's what this video is about. I want to be upfront before we start. I'm not a theologian. I don't have a seminary degree. What I have is years of walking away from God, hitting a wall, and slowly finding my way back. In that process, I started reading the Bible differently. Not looking for rules or comfort verses. Looking for patterns. Because patterns don't lie. In 1 Corinthians 1:27, Paul writes something that stopped me cold. God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. That's not poetic language. That's a strategy. So if you've been sitting on the sidelines of your calling because you don't feel qualified, this video was made for exactly that feeling. 1. God calls you, and it almost never feels like what you expected. Let's start with the call itself. I believed for years that a divine call was supposed to feel dramatically supernatural. Burning bush, audible voice, some unmistakable cinematic moment. And because I never had that moment, I assumed I hadn't been called. Here's what the Bible actually shows. Moses did get the burning bush, but he was 80 years old when it happened. He'd spent 40 years in Pharaoh's palace, then 40 years in the desert. Then God showed up. Exodus 3:1-4 places him at Mount Horeb, doing the most ordinary thing possible. Watching sheep. Not praying, just working. And even with a supernatural sign burning in front of him, Exodus 3:4 says God waited until Moses turned to look before he spoke. The call required attention, not readiness. Attention. Samuel is an even more interesting case. He was a boy living in the temple, about 11 or 12 years old, when God first spoke to him. And 1 Samuel 3:7 includes a detail most people skip. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. He was inside the temple, serving the high priest, the most spiritually saturated environment imaginable. And he still didn't recognize God's voice the first time, or the second, or the third. Proximity to religion is not the same as recognizing a divine call. I know that personally. I grew up in church, Sunday school, youth group, all of it. And I was so inside the institution that I missed what God was actually doing in my life. It wasn't until I walked away. I'm not recommending that. But it wasn't until I was completely outside the structure that I started hearing something I couldn't explain away. A pull. Not a voice, not a vision. A pull. Toward certain conversations, certain questions. Toward this specific thing I do now. Gallup's 2023 research found that 45% of Americans say religion is very important in their lives. And yet, studies consistently show the majority of those same people have never acted on any sense of calling in a concrete way. Nearly half the country carrying something they've never moved on. They felt it. They just didn't move. And that gap between feeling called and actually responding, that's where most people spend their whole lives. I lived there for years. Years where I felt something pulling, and I kept finding reasons it wasn't serious, wasn't the right time, wasn't really God. Just me projecting. just wishful thinking. The call almost always disrupts ordinary life. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't schedule an appointment. It shows up in the middle of your Tuesday and asks you to pay attention. 2. God equips you in stages, not all at once. This is the part that messed with me the most. The idea that if God calls you, He gives you everything right away. You feel the call, you get the tools, you go. That is not what the Bible shows, not even close. David was anointed king by Samuel in 1 Samuel 16. He was probably between 12 and 15 years old, the youngest of Jesse's sons, not yet old enough to serve in Israel's army. His own father didn't even bother calling him in when Samuel arrived. Jesse presented 7 sons before Samuel had to ask, "Are these all the children?" And then, "Oh, there's one more, out in the field with the sheep. That one, that's the one." And then after the anointing, he went back to the field, back to the sheep. For years, he killed Goliath, but after that, years running from Saul, hiding in caves, leading a band of outcasts. 1 Samuel 22:2 describes his men as everyone in distress, everyone in debt, everyone bitter in soul. Those were his troops. That wasn't a detour. It was a classroom. Every skill David would use as king, leading difficult people, navigating betrayal, maintaining faith under pressure, he learned in that cave season. Not in a palace, in survival mode. Now here's the Moses detail I think is deeply underrated. When Moses says in Exodus 4:10, "I am slow of speech and of tongue," God's response isn't to fix his mouth. He gives him Aaron, a partner who could do the specific thing Moses couldn't. God looked at Moses' limitation and said, "I'm not going to remove that. I'm going to use it to create a relationship." For a long time, the things I wasn't good at felt like disqualifications. I'm not formally trained in theology. There are people who know the Bible far deeper than I do. I used all of that as a reason to stay quiet. What if those limitations aren't disqualifications? What if they're exactly where your Aaron shows up? Think about how different the Exodus story looks if you accept that frame. Moses' weakness didn't derail God's plan. It became the very thing that created one of the most important partnerships in the Old Testament. 2 people, each with different gifts, doing together what neither could do alone. That's not a consolation prize. That's the design. The equipping always happens in stages. It's cumulative, often invisible while it's happening, and it almost always involves other people. 3. God transforms you from the inside, and it takes time. Transformation is the part I resisted hardest, because it requires admitting that who you are isn't who you need to become. That's uncomfortable, actually painful if you sit with it. Paul is the most extreme example. Before he was Paul, he was Saul, a Pharisee educated under Gamaliel, completely certain of what God wanted. Acts 8:3 says he was ravaging the church, entering house after house, dragging off men and women to prison. He was sure he was doing the right thing. On the road to Damascus, Acts 9, he's struck down, blinded, and hears, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" God didn't open by giving him a mission. He opened with a question. Why are you doing this? Transformation begins with confrontation. With a question you can no longer answer the old way. After Damascus, Paul spent 3 years in Arabia. Galatians 1:17-18. 3 years of obscurity, being remade from the inside out, before his public ministry ever began. Peter's transformation is slower and more relatable. He sank on the water. He told Jesus he couldn't go to the cross, and Jesus called him Satan. He fell asleep in Gethsemane when Jesus asked him to pray. He denied Jesus 3 times, out loud to strangers, on the worst night. And then, weeks after the resurrection, He stood in Jerusalem and preached with an authority that led to 3,000 baptisms in a single day. Acts 2:41. What happened between those two versions of Peter? He wasn't just forgiven, he was transformed. Not despite his failures, through them. I think about that a lot. There was a season in my life when everything I had built professionally collapsed. A business decision I was confident about. People I had brought in who trusted my judgment. And then, it didn't work. I had to stand in front of people I respected and admit I had gotten things seriously wrong. That I had been more certain than I had any right to be. That season felt like the end of something, like disqualification. But it was actually the beginning of something else. Because it was the first time in my adult life that I genuinely couldn't hold things together on my own. And when you can't hold it together on your own, that's when you actually start looking for something that can. Looking back, that was my Arabia. That was the cave. The place where the version of me that didn't need God got taken apart, so that a version that could actually be used could start to form. If things feel like they're falling apart right now, it might not be destruction. It might be renovation. And anyone who's ever renovated knows, it always looks worse before it gets better. There's a phase where everything is torn open and nothing is finished yet. That phase is real, and that phase is part of it. Quick pause. And I want to be real for a second. This channel is not a side project. It's the thing I feel most called to do. Every script I write, I'm trying to reach people who are in the middle of their hardest seasons. People who feel like they've missed it, like they're too broken, like God couldn't possibly have a plan for someone with their history. If something in the last 13 minutes hit you personally, consider supporting the channel. The link is in the description. It keeps this going. Okay. 2 more. 4. God confirms you. The signs come as you move, not before. This is my favorite of the 5. Gideon is the most human figure in the Bible. Not in a flattering way, in a deeply relatable way. In Judges 6, when an angel tells him he'll save Israel, Gideon's first response isn't excitement. It's Judges 6:13. If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? He argues. He questions. The evidence doesn't match the promise. Even after the angel performs a sign right in front of him, fire consuming an offering, Gideon asks for more. The fleece test, Judges 6:36-40. He asks God to make the fleece wet and the ground dry. God does it. Then he asks again, the exact opposite. God does it again. No frustration, just confirmation. Most teachers use this to illustrate weak faith. I read it differently. In Judges 7, God would reduce Gideon's army from 32,000 men to 300 before the battle. God wanted him certain before facing the impossible. The confirmation process wasn't doubt. It was preparation. Here's the principle. God's confirmation system is motion activated. Abraham didn't get a map. Genesis 12:1. Go to the land I will show you. Future tense. The showing happens as you go. The first video I ever posted on this channel, I had zero confirmation it would reach anyone. Zero. I recorded it, sat on it for 2 weeks, almost deleted it 3 times. The confirmation came after I moved. A comment from someone I'd never met. This is exactly what I needed today. Then another. Then another. Within a week, people from places I'd never been were telling me something in that video had changed something for them. Those weren't coincidences. They were confirmations. But they only came after the first step was taken. You don't get the green light by standing at the intersection. You take one step, and the light changes. One honest caveat, not every open door is divine. 1 John 4:1 says, test the spirits. Samuel needed Eli to recognize what he was hearing. Most of us need someone like that, someone who knows us and can speak into what we're sensing. 5. God assigns you a mission. The last thing God does is give a specific assignment. And this point is easy to misapply. In American evangelical culture, there's a lot of talk about finding your calling, as if it's a single dramatic revelation that clarifies everything forever. I've met people waiting for that moment for 30 years. The Bible doesn't support that model. Assignments come in seasons. They're specific to where you are right now, and they expand as you stay faithful. Noah didn't get a general directive to do something about the world's wickedness. He got exact dimensions. Genesis 6:14-16, 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high, 3 decks, 1 door, roughly 450 feet long by modern measurement. The specificity of the assignment was a form of care. God gave him enough detail to actually start building. Nehemiah is my personal favorite. He was cupbearer to the Persian king Artaxerxes I. Around 445 BC, historically confirmed as the 20th year of Artaxerxes' reign, living comfortably in Susa, far from Jerusalem. When he heard the walls of Jerusalem were still broken down, Nehemiah 1:4 says, he sat down and wept and mourned for days. That mourning was the call, the grief over a specific broken thing. That was God activating a specific assignment inside him. Nehemiah 2:12. I told no one what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. Private, precise, personal, before it was ever public. I think about that verse every time someone asks why I started this channel. For a long time I told nobody. It felt too specific, too personal, too easy to dismiss. You're going to make YouTube videos about God? I could already hear it. But the assignment was specific enough that I couldn't shake it. And I've come to believe that's one of the clearest signs of a genuine calling. It's specific enough to feel embarrassing before it feels empowering. Generic callings cost you nothing. Specific ones require you to put your name on something and say, this is what I believe I'm supposed to do. Mary's assignment was the most specific in all of human history. One woman, one moment, a birth that would split the human calendar in two. And when Gabriel told her, Luke 1:34, her first response wasn't yes, it was a question. How can this be? Permission to have questions. The assignment doesn't require full comprehension. It requires a yes to the first step in front of you. When God chooses someone, 5 specific things happen. He calls them, in ordinary life, requiring attention more than readiness. He equips them, progressively, through limitations and the people who fill them. He transforms them, at the identity level, through the very failures they're most ashamed of. He confirms them, with signs that come as they move, not before. And he assigns them a mission, specific enough to feel uncomfortable before it feels right. Moses, Samuel, David, Gideon, Paul, Peter, Noah, Nehemiah, Mary. Not one felt ready. Not one had a clean record. Not one was the obvious choice. God doesn't choose people because of what they already are. He chooses them because of what he's going to do in them and through them. The choosing comes first. The becoming comes after. I want to leave you with something practical, not just a feeling, but an actual question to sit with. What is the thing you've been feeling pulled toward that you keep explaining away? Not a vague sense that life should be different, something specific. A conversation you keep having in your head. A problem you can't stop thinking about. A thing that makes you angry in a way that feels almost like grief. Like Nehemiah weeping over a wall. That specific thing might not be random. What's the call you've been too afraid to turn and look at directly? The bush has been burning for a while. It just needs you to stop and notice. Before you go, this channel exists because I believe there are people who need faith content that actually meets them where they are. Not just inspirational, not just theological. Something real for real seasons of life. This is my calling. I don't say that lightly. If this video reached you today, consider supporting what we're building. The link is in the description. I'm grateful for every person who makes this possible. Leave a comment. Tell me which of the 5 steps you're in right now. I read every single one, and those comments genuinely often become the next video. Subscribe if you haven't. There's more coming. Wherever you are today, you haven't missed it. You're not too late. You're not disqualified. You're just in the process. See you in the next one.